I'm Chris, this is Offbeat Builds, and today we're doing Terminators. Like all good Ultramarines, this build started out with a Dark Angel model, because cloaks are rad. The first order of business was removing the obvious stab wing iconography, which can be achieved with some careful trimming with a fresh blade, or some haphazard hacking with a dull edge. Do what you want, I'm not your dad. The inevitable mess is hidden with some benevolent scraping, followed by some attention with my favourite fiberglass-based weapon of mild abrasion. With the bird knife now confined to the before times, the main core of the model went together in exactly the sort of way that isn't really interesting, so we'll skip over that to talk about our good friend Kitbashing. I know, but the model got bundled in a set and I've got to use the parts somewhere. So I took a Terminator arm, relieved it of its superfluous hand, and gave our Smash Captain a pose fit for a golfist. If you're doing something like this for yourself, almost any other Thunderhammer is preferable, unless you too have a Kitbashing that's on the donor register. I used the power sword arm from the Leviathan Terminator Captain because I like the pose and I have one on hand, but there are very similar arms in the Deathwing Nightbox. In an attempt to give my Ultramarine a bit of edge, I chose one of the hooded heads from the Knights box, before raiding my bits collection for an appropriate cape. This bit of wayward curtain was sourced from the Sword Brethren kit, which fit rather well, which is nice. Now, if you've watched any of my Space Marine builds before, you'll know that I feel compelled to add extra exorbitant trinkets to the top of the model. This nice little candle holder came from the Triumph of St. Catherine kit, which can be difficult to track down with bit sellers, so I'd suggest looking at Necromunda Corridor Gangers if you too want a captain that spends most of the battle clearing wax off the top of his armour. Anyway, the build was finished off with a nice little shield for symmetry and a purity seal for purity. There he is, the first Ultramarine I've painted since the 90s. Not strictly game legal, I suppose, but if your opponent can't squint hard enough to see a power sword as a Stormbolter, then you just buy him another beer. With that nice little warm-up build under our belts, let's build a Librariologist. Our magic spaceman needs space for a psychic hood, so the pointed arch atop his armour was introduced to the reciprocating enterprise of our old friend, the Razor Saw, first with a horizontal cut and then vertically. And to add insult to injury, I scooped out his, I suppose, lower neck? Anyway, all of that feral hacking made room for a Grey Knight Terminator rear torso, complete with psychic hood, which is convenient. Less convenient is the situation around the back. The new Terminators generally have the rear seat cushions attached to the upper torso, so I needed to liberate some Deathwing arse. With a little bit of fettling, this was attached in place, leaving some small gaps that we'll pretend aren't there for the moment, while we give Job the gift of legs. This angle shows how well the kits match up, which is to say, they don't really, but it's close enough to fix with your filler of choice, and honestly, the gaps are mostly out of sight anyway. Every wizard needs a staff, and here are the parts for mine, his, whatever. This part of the build is pretty straightforward. Cut, drill, pin, repeat. Then realise you actually want a bit from one of those power mace things, so throw that in the mix as well. Obviously, the main appeal of this approach was to include the smoky skull situation from the Watcher in the Dark model that's included in the Deathwing Knights kit. It's a cool part that I can see making its way into all sorts of builds. Anyway, on the other side of the model, I gave our venerable illusionist a power sword from the Deathwing Knights kit, in lieu of a more appropriate but infinitely more boring Stormbolter. Rule of cool and all that. After some unremarkable shoulder pad business, Job got a face, which I think is from the Sternguard kit, but I didn't really make a note of that because of my tricky relationship with professionalism. And finally, to round things out, he of course needed something pointless atop his form to signify that he's a special, one-of-a-kind guy. A one-of-a-kind guy with book daggers. I think we can all agree that Librarian should be blue, but I already had a Smurf in the thumbnail, so what choice did I have? I had some. Anyway, let's do a space vampire. Any suggestion that this guy takes inspiration from Brother Corbulo will be met with what can only be described as furious litigation. Anyway, this entirely original character was going to have Sanguinary priest vibes, and I was tempted to adorn it with an old Deathwing Narthessium, since I do have a few of them lying around, but in the spirit of keeping things current, I used this one from the 15-year-old Grey Knight Terminator box. I removed the hand because I needed Brother Notbulo to be holding a chalice. I took this one from that expensive box that I've been harvesting for months, but you shouldn't do that. The ecclesiastical hand was removed and replaced with something more Ordo Malleus, chosen for its ability to fit onto the Narthessium. With some careful pinning, the chalice was reassembled around the new hand, and after the superglue had grown tired of the life liquid, I glued the assembly in place on the Narthessium wristpiece. While I contemplated the wisdom of the whole wine and surgery get-up that I just assembled, there was no getting away from the need for an arm. Thankfully, Games Workshop kindly provides limbs in almost all of the Terminator boxes, so I used one of them. In order to pay homage to the pose from an unnamed Blood Angel special character of Days Gone, the shoulder joint needed some alteration, and much like the departure of that character from the Codex, this left a void. This was a problem because it meant I'd have to do green stuff work on camera. Worse still, it meant that I'd actually have to talk about doing green stuff work in the voiceover, which, let's be honest, isn't my strong suit. Thankfully, I think I've found a way around that. Over on the other arm, a chainsword was the order of the day, so I chopped up a Terminator arm to obtain the right pose, got to pinning, and attached an Astartes chainsword. Exciting stuff. Less exciting than that were the shoulder pads, but they're a necessity, as is the head, which came from the depths of my bits box. The final task, as you'd expect, was to pile some Greeblies on top of the model, but this time it's justified. Apothecaries have stuff on top of their power packs that presumably helps with their rollers, organ thieves. Gotta have good lighting when you're desecrating a corpse. And with that self-evident morsel, our Blood Angel's complete. We're not going to read too much into the whole fleur-de-lis thing on the chalice, it's just a nice pattern. Now, as for why the blood that the chalice is carrying is ablaze, well, there is a simple explanation. If you're thinking the only reason I chose to make a Black Templar is because I wanted to use the flaming chainsaw dealie from the Ministorum Priest model, well, then you're probably onto something. The Vindicator, as it's called, needed mounting onto a Terminator arm, so I removed the power sword from this one, leaving the crossguard in place. The weapon itself was cut down the centre of the receiver, and after some off-camera pinning, it was secured in place where the power sword once was. The lower arm was joined by an upper, and the newly minted arm soon found itself joined to the torso at the shoulder, which might seem unconventional, but I promise you, it's going to be big in 2026. Combi weapons never go out of style. Unfortunately, the only ones I had were two-handed affairs. So my first action against this Sternguard combi melter involved the tip of a scalpel blade and prayers to assorted deities. I left the operation with all of my fingers, the Sternguard not so much, and with a little bit of sprugu, my surgical crimes were neatly disguised, a mantra by which I try to conduct myself. Then, guided by the only song that I know about kitbashing, the arm bone was connected to the shoulder bone, and the combi melter bone was haphazardly glued atop the fist bone. Oh look, candles. You can probably tell where this is going, right on top of the torso. If the designers didn't want me to do it, then they shouldn't have left a big, flat, featureless expanse there, should they? Anyway, enough post-Greeble justification, let's just get through the purity seal bit and we can look at the glamour shots. There we go, 4 Terminator characters. As usual, I do hope these provided some ideas or inspiration for your own builds, or failing that, a short distraction from whatever it is you're supposed to be doing. On that note, I should probably go and see where that smoke's coming from.